Anybody nervous? People always ask me if I was ever going to bring out snakes, and I thought this would be the perfect morning. But I'm not. I just figured I'd say that. Holy Spirit, we talked about how in the Trinity that God is one in essence, but three in person. This morning we're going to be talking about the Holy Spirit. Holy Spirit is not some kind of energy or abstract force. Rather, the Holy Spirit is a person, which we're going to talk about this morning. And the issue with the Holy Spirit is there are some churches like that, maybe y'all grew up in that background, that make a lot about the Holy Spirit, and everything's got to be Spirit-led, and everything's got to end with the Spirit told me. And, of course, that's where I always hear the voice of April. Anytime somebody says, well, the Spirit told me, and April says, I asked Jesus, he said no. But people use those kind of things, and they talk about, they'll say, Spirit-led service is so powerful, and it's so emotional and so expressive, which is a polite way of saying, y'all people are nuts, and you do some weird stuff. And it does get a little weird sometimes in those churches. But then on the other end of the spectrum, you have other churches where the Holy Spirit is like Voldemort, like the that which cannot be named. And if you so much as mention the Holy Spirit or bring anything out about the Spirit, well, then you're on the outs. I actually grew up in a church where a pastor was fired because there was rumor that he had some friends over for a Bible study at their house, and there they spoke in a Holy Spirit-prompted tongue. And so he got fired from the church, and that was sort of swept away, and nobody wanted to talk about what happened, but something that shouldn't have happened. And so maybe you grew up in that kind of a church where if anything happens that deals with the Holy Spirit, that gets pushed away. And at Essential, we've got a little bit of everybody. So some of y'all, that was your background growing up. Others of you was the total opposite. On staff, we've got folks who grew up in a more Holy Spirit-led, charismatic type format, and we've got those who, that's the farthest thing from their experience, whether it be sort of the frozen chosen of Presbyterianism or staunch high Catholicism. We've got both of those on staff. For me, I'm a complete religious mutt. I grew up in that church that any mention of the Holy Spirit could get you fired. Then after that, we went to a Presbyterian church because I guess the Methodist wasn't quite strict enough. And then after that, we swung out of that, went to a sort of a Saddleback Willow Creek style of church, if you're familiar with those. I then went off to seminary. I went to a Baptist seminary because they're good at teaching the Bible. I wasn't Baptist. After that, I attended a black church for a while and then went to a Calvary Chapel church for a while. All the while, back when I was a kid, I got saved at a Assemblies of God camp and then went back and served on staff there and took my kids back there as a camp pastor for many years. And so I've kind of been around everywhere. I've got close friends that are from every walk of life and every background denomination. I listen to pastors from all different walks of life. I like their input on things. So what really is the proper role with the Holy Spirit? Sometimes I'll get asked by folks who will come up and maybe they came more from that background. I think it's funny about Essential. No matter what background you came from, everybody assumes Essential is just like your background. If you came from conservative, you're like, I just like, ultra-conservative, fundy church like I came from. That's what I like about Essential. Stick around for a while. You might get offended. Then I got other folks who come over here and they're like, I just love the Spirit-led, everything about it, but how come, you're not prophesying and speaking in tongues at all? Why aren't we doing that? And I say, because Paul said, I'd rather you not. What do you mean he said you'd rather not? It's biblical. I know, but if you read the letter about the Corinthian church, he's not really affirming most of that stuff. He's kind of saying, no, he's correcting a lot of it. Then if you get to 1 Corinthians 14, like verse 16, 17, he goes, honestly, I'd rather you not. I'd rather you just preach the word. That's what I'd rather you do on Sunday morning. So guess what we do? We preach the word. We don't do a lot of other stuff because Paul says, I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm just saying I'd rather you not. And that's sort of where we come out on a lot of these issues. Is not that we're not making a statement about right or wrong. I'm just saying Paul said I'd rather you not, and so we follow that guidance. If you're looking for the actual reference on that, that was 1 Corinthians 14, 19. He says, I'd rather you speak five words that people can understand rather than 1,000 words in a tongue that nobody has a clue what you're saying and they think you're drunk. I think that's something else he goes here. So I'd rather you not. Anyway, so with that, this morning, I want to look at who the Holy Spirit is and sort of correct some teaching on it. We might get a better picture of it.